Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I wanted to post a video sort of comparing 12 or 13 major religions of this world and to see what they have in common. So I took some quotes, some main words how they describe these religions specifically. For example, in one line, get to the main point of it. And I collected them and I put them all together in a list for myself. And it's pretty interesting when you consider what they're actually trying to tell humanity and how similar it all actually really is. So therefore it also instantly sort of makes clear to us that throughout history, people fighting each other over whose religion is better is kind of silly. And it still happens to this day, of course, around the globe. But ultimately, again, what you're going to find out is that they're all saying the same thing. So we can learn something absolutely powerful from this. And that's what I want to share with you today. So first I'm going to go over the religions specifically by name and then some quotes, perhaps some multiple quotes that I could find that are interesting. And then I'll just conclude what I got out of it. And perhaps, if you contemplate this for yourself, you'll get something out of it in your own way. Not just based on what I shared about it, but ultimately how it helps you awaken further as well in this journey, this physical experience of ours. Now, I will say up front, some of these religions had very unique names. Let's put it like that. They some of them I didn't even know existed. Okay, guys, that's kind of interesting. But I mean, if you go over it, then you realize, well, but they're saying the same thing. So even though I don't know about it, I do recognize sort of what they're trying to say based on perhaps Christianity or whatever else major religion that you have been following and raised with. You see, because I was raised in the West, in the Netherlands, in Europe. Christianity here, well, was kind of the main idea here with my parents. What they knew as a religious text would be the Bible in our home. But some families, they might have the Quran. They're into Islam and stuff like that as well. In the West, slowly but surely, it's sort of growing over here. But then you have Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. that people also have been interested in the West, but they're more major in the East, for example. So, you see, what you're going to find out is it's going to be pretty insightful. So let's just get over first what the religions would be that I want to discuss. They are Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Taoism, Judaism, Confucianism, Baha, Shinto, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, and Hermeticism. Now, as I said, I'm sorry if I mispronounce some of these religious names, because again, they're pretty unique, as I said. But we'll just go over them now. First one I wanted to discuss, or at least share something from, was Sikhism. And a proverb of it is that we should shout aloud in ecstasy, "True is the great timeless one." That is the Sikh slogan. Now, shout of victory, triumph, or exaltation, which means one will be blessed eternally, who says that God is the ultimate truth. Now, that already right there is pretty similar to what you would find in Christianity, but also what you find in Hinduism, actually. In Buddhism, perhaps not so much. They don't really necessarily talk about God as much, but they're talking more about achieving this enlightenment within yourself, this harmony, this unity with life. But you see, that already is pretty interesting. So that's the first one I wanted to share, that a person, you or I, we could consider, should shout aloud in ecstasy, "True is the great timeless one," the timeless one being God, God's nature that created the universe. Now let's look at Taoism. They say, we look at it and do not see it. It is invisible. We listen to it and do not hear it. It is inaudible. We touch it and do not feel it. It is intangible. Now again, this is describing God's nature. It's describing the true basis for this reality that we're experiencing currently. That we look at it, but we don't really see the cause that created everything. It is invisible. We listen to it and do not hear it. It is inaudible. So these things are actually revealing to you how you can learn to listen and hear and see through the inner world, through your own consciousness. So it's dealing with a deeper reality that is more subtle, and we're not talking necessarily about something coming to you through your physical senses, and yet that is where most people are trying to search for the truth, and then they don't find it necessarily, and they get confused and lost, and perhaps completely, demoralized in this journey seeking the truth. Because if we look objectively, physically speaking, at this world, there's so much contradictions going on, so much conflict, so it makes it very confusing to consider the nature of God and whether God is truly good or whether he is truly love, as some scriptures said. So the Tao is actually already hinting at the fact that this all deals with spiritual reality, guys. We have to go within, we have to sense this from within, and if it's not happening there as of yet, well then for now we just don't understand it yet, but our consciousness can evolve in that direction. That's the beautiful part. Now, next one will be Shinto. And there are 4 affirmations in Shinto: tradition and family, love of nature, physical cleanliness, and Matsuri, and which is a festival in which worship and honor is given to the kami, which kami means God, as far as I know in Japanese, or at least is a term for perhaps God. So again, what it's talking about: tradition and family, love of nature, physical cleanliness, and God. Or at least Matsuri would be a festival dedicated to God. Now again, if you look at that, tradition and family, yes, we have to keep those in harmony. Now of course, it's still a fact that many families are actually broken and pretty negative, and there's all sorts of conflicts happening within the family unit itself, and tragically enough. But we ourselves, we could work on this by, if we become aware of this, we can actually work on having good, connections within the family unit of ourselves. So if you're a dad or a mom and you're married or whatever the case is, because I'm assuming most people are already, not necessarily young people or children that are still living with their parents. Most of us aren't. But we can learn to do all this by understanding these concepts, by honoring these elements of life, by having the goal and the idea of doing something good through these aspects of our life. So through tradition and family, love of nature, being in harmony with nature. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go out into the forest and meditate for years in a row. You could do that if you want, but it's more about understanding the connection, I would say, you share with nature and the beauty of life itself. Because life, you could say, is part of nature also. And most people, they don't really like perhaps being alive even. They see too much crazy stuff happening out there. Now, physical cleanliness. Now, of course, well, that speaks for itself. I don't think I have to really add anything to that, because we all know that that's just better the way it is in general. So if you have if there's some sort of reason for you that you don't want to be physically clean, well, I won't judge, okay? But maybe then if you go into a room, people might not like the smell. But that's just really, really objectively talking about physical cleanliness. You can also do this more subjective, that you should have cleanliness in your mind, of consciousness, that you should clean out all the negative, the garbage, the crazy stuff that you might think and feel about others or yourself. I mean, if we keep the mind clean, we can also more easily keep our physical life clean. That's just the way it works. Now then, this worship and honor is given to God. You worship and honor God in your heart, but you don't do it because you are afraid that God demands you to do that, or that you go to hell or something, and also none of that. You're free to just simply worship and honor God. The fact that you're alive now, that you're in this incredibly large universe of insane proportions, physically speaking, that we cannot even comprehend. That's already worthy of honor and, worship on its own, if you think about it. On the next one will be Judaism. It says, do not be wise in words, be wise in deeds. You see, this is basically another way of saying that actions speak louder than words. By their fruits you shall know them. So, if you know how to do things better, then be sure to do so as well physically. I remember my mentor once said that he knew someone that would tell him, once you know better, do better. So until then, if you don't know any better, you can't technically, truly, entirely blame yourself for the things that may have gone wrong in the past. Some people that feel so sad and distressed about what happened in their past, how they perhaps treated people. The thing is, guys, perhaps you didn't know better, but now that you hopefully have become wiser and you do know better, well then actually physically do better. Start practicing being better to people, or at least treating them better. And if people still treat you like trash in return, which happens all the time, we can't deny this. Well, still remember that you, yourself, as an individual, should just be wise. And mostly wise in deeds, yes. Make sure that you're just in harmony with God, with the universe, spiritually be in harmony with life. And things will just keep improving because you're acting upon it. Now, the next one with Confucianism, I had a few more quotes from their movement. And it said, everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. They must often change who would be constant in happiness or wisdom. What the superior man seeks is in himself. What the small man seeks is in others. So here again, this movement is also talking about us working with our own consciousness to see the good, to see the beauty. You see, everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. How true? How true is that? You can sit at home and you could have a wonderful life, and then still, for whatever reason, you don't even realize how good your life actually is. I'm guilty of this as well. I'm not gonna lie about this. I've been guilty of this all the time, to be honest. It's so easy to take things for granted, and then you don't really see the beauty anymore in it. But if you keep making a conscious, deliberate act to see beauty in everything around you, well, it's gonna lift not only you up, but it tends to lift others up as well, because they too might forget about the beauty in their own life. So you become this beacon of light and wisdom. It's actually pretty fun to do and to start practicing. They also said that, they must often change with constant happiness or wisdom. You see, it's about us daring to keep expanding our insights and connection that we share with life on a spiritual level, and then by constantly renewing that connection, by constantly working with it and expanding our own wisdom about it, then you will become happier and more fulfilled throughout your days, because you're not stagnating and staying stuck, sort of deal. Now, what the superior man seeks is in himself, what the small man seeks is in others. Yeah, there's so many people, so many people out there, they seek happiness and something, they seek it through other people specifically. They forget that the other person is, physically speaking, literally only temporary there. So even though you could be in a relationship, you could be lonely and seeking someone out that wants to be with you, and then you find someone that is with you, and then they pass away perhaps before you want them to pass away, in the worst case scenario sort of deal. And then you're like completely lost, because you were so used to seeking your happiness through this other person instead of you seeking it within yourself, which means to turn towards the essence, the one substance of life, which again would be God. The very essence that created everything. It is unknowable. You can't know it entirely at all. I mean, it's just beyond our conception, but you can sort of sense and feel unity with this source anyway, even if you don't understand it fully. It still will lift you up by you recognizing it within yourself. That's the beauty. Now, the next one is Jainism, and it says, non-injury to all living beings is the only religion. It was described as the first truth of Jainism. In happiness and suffering, in joy and grief, we should regard all creatures as we regard our own self, and should therefore refrain from inflicting upon others such injury as would appear undesirable to us if inflicted upon ourselves. So, I mean, this seems pretty well known. I think it was also in Christianity set in a different way, that treat your neighbor as the way you want to be treated, stuff like that. We have heard of this probably, but are we actually working with this in our lives? Because again, just remember, at the very end of this, I will, try to describe my conclusion from all these movements combined, and then it's pretty interesting what I figured out for myself. So again, if you start thinking about living in this matter, again, you're just using your consciousness for good, for something positive, for harmony and upliftment, and for something, constructive and not destructive. You want to help lift everyone up. Now, it doesn't mean that you will be able to do it necessarily, because some people like to be down there in the mud, rolling around. Like, I'll not use the terms that I would want to use here. It's probably not very nice of me to go there, but you get the idea. If you just treat others with kindness and respect, the trick is to do that even if they don't treat you like that. But the beautiful and the funny part is, I mean, what I figured out as I grew up is that I can treat people with kindness and respect from a distance. I don't have to say this physically, that's the thing. I don't have to be up in their face and tell them and show them that I want to treat them with kindness and respect, because some people, they're so disrespectful and unkind to us for whatever reason that it's not really a lot of fun to actually physically be around these people anyway. But then the trick is to have kindness and respect for them inside your conscience for them from a distance, without actually bothering to, show that at all to them, to actually be involved with them at all. You don't have to do that, but by doing kindness and respect in your conscience for them from a distance means that your consciousness is still operating at a very positive level. It's a lot of fun, I could tell you that much. It actually makes life so much better if you learn to do this and finally let go of your need for revenge or to get even, perhaps. I know sometimes people do stuff that is so despicable and painful and hurtful to us that we get tempted to want to get even with them, but ultimately, life is consciousness, is a journey through consciousness, and the faster we learn to become in harmony with God, with the positive, then the faster we will be lifted up into bliss and having a great experience once and for all. Now let's go to the next one. It's about Zoroastrianism, and it says, turn yourself not away from 3 best things: good thought, good word, and good deed. I like this one really much. It's a powerful reminder. You see, how have you been thinking throughout your day? Is it good thoughts? Are you thinking in positive terms, in terms of beauty and love and all that good stuff that all religions actually seem to hint at? If you just work on this every day for yourself, do I have good thoughts in my mind? Am I using good language in my private time? This one is more subtle though, because we're not just talking about verbally talking in good words, but also, again, inside your mind. It's so easy to get lost in negative self-conversations, either about yourself or in your mind. You start having conversations about other people and things in this world that is very negatively charged. So we want to keep practicing that they too are good conversations that always aim at the positive, try to bring it out of the darkness. And then, okay, of course, good deeds again, as we mentioned earlier as well, is that we just want to make sure that physically we live up to our own wisdom and to the goodness that we can feel and actually perceive through consciousness. The more we learn to live from this attitude, well, the more you're actually operating from inward outwardly. So most people, they let the outside world control their mind. So then, depending on how things are, they might have a good thoughts, good words in their minds and saying it out loud, and good deeds. That's how people do. They live in reaction to everything around them instead of deliberately generating good thoughts, good words, and good deeds from their own consciousness by deliberately thinking and living by goodness in themselves, right? So this is very important. You can probably guess why it is important. If you don't understand why this would be important, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say, because it should be obvious the more you think about it. Now the next one, this was is Hermeticism. We have discussed some of this, but this was a line that I thought was also very interesting, where they stated that birth is not the beginning of life, it is the beginning of individual awareness. Change into another state is not death, only the ending of this awareness. So we have to consider whether consciousness would go on or not once you've passed away. Certain people, they don't believe that. That's fine. They would say, no, consciousness is an activity of the brain, so when you die and the brain stops functioning, well, you're gone into oblivion, into nothingness, and it's just all over. It's fine if you want to believe that. I personally don't believe it, and I've already made dozens of videos of why I don't necessarily believe that consciousness ends when you die. I too believe it's more of a shift in perception, in experience, in dimension, all that stuff. We could use those terms, but yes, it is a beautiful thing to consider, because it will help you lift yourself out of potentially a lot of pain and darkness and ignorance as you go through this life. If you really, the fear of death, guys, that is what's behind most of the negative. It causes us to start, in a subtle way, worrying and hoarding and doing all kinds of stuff physically. It actually makes no sense, because we're kind of feeling like I'm running out of time. Like, it's so subtle, you might not deliberately think those words, but it's like a subtle fear that just drives you pretty crazy, physically speaking, and how you start behaving and dealing with people, because you feel it's all temporary. So I have to, do stuff like crazy. Though it is true, everything is temporary, so there's something beautiful to it, but if that is combined with a fear of your life ending, your ego identity vanishing from this world again, well, that's where the problem lies. So if you understand the deeper part of your consciousness, which could also be said to be the soul, etc., well, then you don't really have to be afraid of death anymore, because you just move on. Your eternal journey, it goes on. Where it goes, how it all goes on, exactly, nobody really knows. But as part of all these religious movements is to have faith in God, to understand that many of this that we are experiencing is pretty much unexplainable. We don't entirely understand it, and therefore we don't have to exclude death from this either. We don't fully understand death either. I mean, that's just the truth. We don't 100% understand then either what would happen. And if there is more to it, if we get proof of that, we will still not truly understand it. I mean, I can say this for myself, even though I have had some wild experiences that I would describe as being in other dimensions of this universe. I mean, I still don't understand it myself. I have no clue how it all works, and I probably never will, and that's okay. But at least I don't have to be afraid of death. It might only be a little uncomfortable, perhaps, once the moment comes that you have to let go, but it kind of depends on whether you've also made peace with this when it occurs. The more you want to fight against it, the worse your own death will probably be as an experience. So just keep in mind the unity. That's the most important part. Now, if we go to the next one, I think it's Baha, the tablets of the Baha Ullah. It's like, okay, yeah, I know I mispronounced everything there, but again, it's one of those that I actually never heard of before. But it said that the word of God, which the supreme pen hath recorded on the seventh leaf of the most exalted paradise, is this: O man of wisdom among nations, shut your eyes to estrangement, then fix your gaze upon unity. Cleave tenaciously unto that which will lead to the well-being and tranquility of all mankind. This span of earth is but one homeland and one habitation. It behoveth you to abandon vain glory, which causeth alienation, and to set your hearts on whatever will ensure harmony. In the estimation of people of Baha, man's glory lieth in his knowledge, his upright conduct, his praiseworthy character, his wisdom, and not in his nationality or rank. That's pretty cool. Now, I'll let that one for you to sink in and contemplate, because it actually already it's already tying into this whole attitude of us using our consciousness in a good way. That's literally what it is saying there. So if you missed it, well, again, it's because you should contemplate this for yourself and think about what these texts are actually trying to reveal to you. Now, if we go to the next one, which is Buddhism, well, it taught that wisdom, kindness, patience, generosity, and compassion were important virtues. See, Buddhism doesn't necessarily deal with God, as other religions do and movements. It deals more with how you as an individual are behaving in this reality. And the more you let it be guided by these virtues of wisdom, kindness, patience, generosity, and compassion, well, the more your own individual life will be a better experience, but of course also for the people around you. Because we can all agree, if you treat people with these virtues, well, of course things are going to be better. It's only a very negative, dark person that might not respect that and like that if you treat them with kindness, etc. But I mean, that's pretty much someone that is perhaps also mentally ill. They're out there, but we all normally would know that, yeah, we would like kindness, generosity, compassion. We would like that if people treat us like that. But the beautiful part is, if you treat people like that yourself, it's also going to be wonderful for you and everyone around you. So you again become like a positive influence and beacon during this current physical reality of yours. If we look at Hinduism, and they say, help thy brother's boat across, and lo and behold, thine own has reached the shore. Through leisure, he who cannot dance puts the blame on the floor. Giving, they who give have all things, they who withhold have nothing. Sorrow, the miserable are very talkative. Yeah. I mean, how many times have you heard other people talk constantly about how bad things are in their lives? And then in all those seconds that they spend talking about everything that they feel bad about, they're completely missing the point that they're just wasting their time. They're just ruining their life. All those seconds that you spent on talking about why things are bad for you could have also been used to do something good, not just for yourself but the world at large. We should never forget about this, because that is where the joy of living comes in, by us actually deliberately working in unity with the nature, with the substance behind all of life. So they're good points, to help, to be helpful, to use your leisure time in a good way, to be giving. And it doesn't mean that you have to give until it hurts, or that you deliberately give away your stuff even though you don't want to. We're talking about giving from a place of abundance that comes from your unity with the substance of life itself, which is abundant and always giving, or else nothing would have existed. Creation is an act of giving in and of itself. That's a deeper metaphysical perception that I personally work with, but perhaps it helps you out as well in this idea of how can I give, and what is giving all about? What ultimately is about creating, doing something. Now let's look at Islam. It says Allah is our objective, the Prophet is our leader, the Quran is our law, jihad is our way, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. Well, yeah, this is pretty interesting, because I think we're all pretty familiar by now in this day and age that Islam and Christianity seem to be in a lot of conflict globally. Perhaps it's just more known due to the technology and stuff, but there's seems to have been a lot of conflict between these two religious movements, specifically in the West. But ultimately, Allah is their term for God. Now, their prophet was Muhammad, and the Quran, the book, their scriptures is their law, jihad is their way, dying in the way of Allah is our highest hope. So ultimately, Islam, by that line alone, if you were just to take that line on its own, it is obviously also telling that we want to unite with God in our conscience, in our souls, because that's what we all are seeking, you see. And all these religious movements that we discussed just earlier before this Islam, if you look at what they all said, it's all similar. It's all about unity, oneness with God, with the nature, with the essence of life itself. So therefore it is actually beautiful, but sadly things can get a bit distorted out here in general when people, get upset with each other because they have a different religion. Now, I don't think that's the best way to go about this at all. If we just keep an open mind, we can see the unity, and unity is ultimately what we all want, to be united with God, of course, with the nature of life. That's when we truly start feeling alive and understanding more about ourselves and this marvelous universe in which we exist. Now let's look at the final one, Christianity. Here are some quotations that you're probably all familiar with, and it's called, "Be still and know that I am God. Whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in you. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Let go and let God. Fear ends where faith begins. I will praise thee with my whole heart. The Lord gives wisdom. Trust in the Lord with all your heart." Yeah, well, we have already discussed a lot about Christian concepts in general, because again, that's what I was mostly raised with. That's why it's probably, I think for most people, the most known sort of text that we know about concerning God and the nature of life. But again, perhaps we don't understand it at all, or it's not being taught in the right way, and we become kind of upset with it and don't want to follow along with it, because that happens all the time in the church, where things are pretty distorted in their way. Most of the teaching of the church, when their teachings are being distorted, what happens is that people are taught to look outside of themselves for God, or to look at a figure named Jesus Christ from history as their savior, instead of looking within. You see, because remember what one of these religious movements said. It said, the superior man seeks in himself, and the small man seeks in others. So if we have the concept of God outside ourselves, or we just focus on Jesus Christ as a figure from history, we are looking outside and we're seeking in others again. We're warned through other movements, if we combine them all, not to do that. It is all within us. This connection, this gateway to God, to the nature of reality, is within us. That is what all these movements are saying. And if we follow them, just by the words that I shared through this video alone, you will automatically start lifting yourself up out of misery and darkness into light and love and beauty. So what do all 13 have in common? Here we go. My conclusion was simply this. They're all saying that we should be good in spirit and mind, and through physical action. have love in your heart for God and all of creation. That should be your attitude. You see, that has been my conclusion. I could not conclude it in any other way. Of course, I could add something to this if I keep studying and going over this for myself. But that was the initial conclusion that I wrote for myself. That I should be good in spirit and mind. You could ask yourself that as well. Have you been good in spirit and mind? And physical action? So in our ignorance, we might not physically act all that nice and good. But that's the question. Have I been good in spirit and mind and then in physical action? I'm working on that right now personally for myself. And man, it's changing my life even more. Because the more I approach people from a place of compassion, and even though, as I said earlier as well, you don't have to necessarily tell people this physically to them, to their face. Because I already explained, some people are so negative, it's not really much fun to be around them anyway. But if you start to be good in spirit in general, regardless of where they are in their journey, that's the beauty. We're going to get into that in a future video as well, by the way. But if you understand it from that perspective, well, then you can start to actively work on being good in spirit and mind and your physical actions. Have love in your heart for God and all of creation, because that makes you more in harmony with everything around you. Of course, there's negative stuff going on. So how can you have love in your heart for God and all of creation, including the negative? Well, you can only do that by understanding that everyone, everything, it's part of a great eternal cosmic journey, and everybody's on their own level of awakening, of understanding, of consciousness itself. So some people are pretty high up there in spiritual awareness and knowledge and unity. Others aren't, and therefore they are more destructive and chaotic in their behavior. We might not like that destructiveness and chaos and negativity that we see. We would prefer if it's gone, of course, but ultimately if you can just simply accept, well, they're also on their own journey and on their own level of consciousness. So even though I would not do what they're doing, I will still respect that they do have the freedom to act out in the way that they are. Yeah, I know this takes a lot of practice and spiritual insight to actually understand, because the ego really does not like that I put it that way. We want to fight everything, generally speaking, but again, remember what all these religions have in common. To be good in spirit and mind and physical action, have love in your heart for God and all of creation. That should be your attitude. So start practicing it. Start working with it in your own life, and you're going to see everything change around for the better. I can promise you that much. It's absolutely incredible. Anyways, this video has been going on for a long time. I only see like 32 minutes, right? If I start working on my videos unscripted, it's true, they can become very long, but perhaps people enjoy that as well. If they want to gain some more insights from my perspectives on life, well, here you go. This is like a huge podcast sort of deal in this way. Hopefully it offered you some more insights, and other than that, hope you have a great day. And if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis, and I'll see to it that I'll try and share some more of these wonderful insights over time. Now, with all of this being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.